G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Mark Effinger from Nootopia, based in Burlington, United States of America. Thanks for your time today, Mark.
Oh, so good to see you, Troy. Thanks.
Let's start with how we know each other. So Diana from Podcast Cola has put us in touch with some great guests in the past and thought you'd be another great one for us.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that, as even though my business is associated with nutritional supplements and basically replacing the clear pill that Bradley Cooper took in the movie The Matrix. Or no, that was it was Limitless.
Limitless, yeah.
My heart and soul are in hyper growth businesses and how to do it and have fun doing it. So,
all right. We'll tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
So our current business is called Nootopia, and we are the world leader in customized, personalized nootropics, which are mind-expanding, mind-enhancing, cognitive performance nutrition supplements. So, and what we do is we basically we customize our solutions to help people get higher cognitive performance, last longer, do better in things that require your brain to operate at a high level. And we also help you to program states. So if you need to be focused, that's a state of focus. If you need to be loving, a state of loving. If you need to be very strategic, a state of a state that resonates with that. And if you need to be hyper creative, and we custom make products that address all of those in a high state consciousness kind of way.
Fantastic. And I love how you summed it all up, that it's you're replacing the clear pill from Limitless. So that's a really easy way to understand exactly what you do.
Well, it's funny. When I started this, I had 1,000 beta customers, and I spent 4 years creating 3,000 different formulations to try to come up with one that worked. And these people, I was in business with the founder of Century 21 Real Estate at the time. We had a software product called Idea Fisher.
Yep.
And it was the kind of world leader in brainstorming software. So we had about 400,000 customers on that. I took a micro subset of that, a little over 1,000 of those, and said, hey, I'm going to send you tubes every week of stuff that tastes like crap. You're going to take it and you're going to go to my online forum and tell me how it helped you perform.
Yep.
So that was kind of the beta for it. Well, at the end of that 4 years, which was 2011, summer of 2011, is I sent the really highly optimized working formula that was customized to each one of those 1,000+ customers, and said, what do you think of this? And they said, this is awesome. And it's just like the thing from that movie, Limitless. I hadn't seen the movie. So I went and I watched the movie. I said, holy crap, you're right. This is like that.
Yeah.
And I called a good friend of mine I'd been in business with for a number of years in the past. We had built a laser display technology to do laser advertising on movie screens, as well as concerts and other stuff. And I called him and I said, Wyatt, what do I call this thing, man? I don't know how to name it. And he quickly went to the United States Patent Trademark Office website and said, you know what? They didn't trademark any of these terms, the clear pill, NZT, NZT48, right? And so I bought all of those domains as .coms. I put up landing pages for them, connected them to my website. And for the first 5 years, Bradley Cooper was, unbeknownst to himself, our pitch man. So
I can't believe. So the movie studio did not trademark those key terms used in the movie.
No, they just trademarked Limitless, the movie, and eventually they got the clear pill. That was one of their other things. So
great. Wow. Fantastic. So how did you start out? I know you've had a few businesses. Do you want to jump back to the start and quickly run through?
Yeah. So there's a really pre-business start, which was in 8th grade. My stepdad came home one day. My stepdad had gone from just being an academic working for a NASA subcontractor on the space on a bunch of space stuff, moon stuff, and microbes that might come back from the planets and from the moon. And he said to me, he goes, son, you'll never make money working for the other guy. And I had a paper out at the time. And I said, who's the other guy? And he said, he drives a Porsche, a Cadillac, or a Mercedes.
Yeah.
And he had just gone from being kind of a kind of upper blue collar or upper mid level, right, to being hired. He was fired from a microbiology company locally, hired by 4 doctors who had started a clinical laboratory, and they made him CEO because he was a smart man and he was able to talk himself for no dollars down. And within the first 3 years, he was making $500,000 a year. So that was his take home. He was doing really well. So,
and they gave him equity.
Yeah, they gave him a 25% of the company.
Oh, right. Wow.
Yeah. And a bunch of other, and then an unlimited income based on what the performance of the company would do. So he did well. And so he just he told me that. He says, you'll never make money working for the other guy. So I said, who's the other guy? He told me to drive one of those 3 cars. So my parents were members of a tennis club, and I happened to go by there one day, and I noticed that parking lot was full of Mercedes, Cadillacs, and Porsches. And I went in and I begged for a job, and they eventually relented. They let me clean the tennis courts at night after everybody went home, because they get lint. You get ball lint on the court, and I used that as an opportunity to interview everybody that came into the club and said, what do you do? How do you like it? What sucks about it? I didn't know the term spouse at the time, but what is your significant other or your husband or your wife like about it? And it was great. So I got a really nice compressed education on what successful people thought like and operated like and spoke like. And it was great. It was great. So
that's really
fast forward.
Yeah, Mark, that's really smart. How old were you when you did that?
That was 13, 14, 15 years old.
Wow.
I became a competitive tennis player, junior competitive tennis player, and I played at district and state for the area that I lived in. And then I dropped out of high school. So after the end of my sophomore year, I had a job making parts for nuclear reactors. And so I was making a outsized kind of income for where I was living and working in my age, 16 years old. And so I went to University of Oregon for a week when the senior tennis players graduated and went to a frat. And they said, hey, come, bring some weed and entertain us for a week. We'll let you hang out. There's going to be pretty girls. And so I did the same thing. I interviewed all those people and said, why are you here at college? How long is it going to take? What are you going to make when you get out? I was already making more than they were anticipating to make when they got out. So I went back home, called my tennis coach and said, Don convinced me to stay in school. And he said, are you kidding, Mark? I've never convinced you of anything. So, right. So my stepdad made a deal with me. He said, if you'll go in the Air Force, I had a bigger brother in the Air Force. If you'll go in the Air Force, I will match every dollar you send home for your first enlistment. And so I called up the recruiter, said, how long can I make a first enlistment? He said, 6 years. I said, sign me up. So I signed up as an OSI agent, which was, there's an old a show called $6 Million Man, where, right, he was in Air Force and he was in a thing called the OSI. So I signed up in the Air Force to be a spy in the OSI and failed that because of my drug background, because I had done some drugs and things. So they made me a jet aircraft technician, and so I did that. And I saved $32,000 while I was in. I lived like a pauper, but I did cool stuff. I raced motorcycles, and I did, free climbing on Yosemite and a lot of cool stuff. And so I got out, but just before I got out, I knew I wanted to start a company. Now we're talking about 1986. I want to start a company. I had my savings, 32,000, which seemed like a king's ransom to a kid that had never made more than $1,000 a month. And you could buy a house back then in the neighborhood I grew up in for 70,000 would be a nice 2,000, 3,000 square foot home.
Wow.
So, right. Those days are gone.
Yeah.
So there was a front cover article. I'm not sure if you can see this, but this is a test tube. It's actually a vacutainer where you use to draw blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've got a little baby in it, and it's got water. So in 1984, the front page of Life magazine had the 10-year anniversary of the first in vitro fertilization, aka test tube babies. Yep. I called my stepdad. I'd been reading Inc. magazine, learning the terms like angel investor and venture capital. And I said, Jack, I need some venture capital. And once he got off the floor and said, "You should probably get your high school diploma first," um, he said, "What are you looking for?" And I said, "You saw the front page." He goes, "Of course, I've got it on my desk." And I said, that's going to about to have a 6-month lifetime on the front cover of various magazines as it goes down the magazine food chain. So, Popular Science is going to have it. It's going to go to Business Week. People magazine will grab it, all these things. So I said, I want to sell test tube babies to raise money to start my first company. And he laughed and said, "That's a really interesting idea, but it's too much of a pet rock. I'm out." That was my right.
Yeah.
That was my dragon's den. Well, the next week, as I'm riding my bike back from the Air Force Base to my little rental house, there was a UPS guy putting a bunch of boxes on the front porch, and he handed me a note, which was the invoice, and it was a letter from my stepdad that said, "Dear Mark, here's your venture capital, love, Jack." And what it was a bunch of expired vacutainers, 2,000 of them. They came at the time with stainless steel test tube racks because we're using laboratories. So a girlfriend, Elise Kinch, my roommate, we called him Vic Ferrari, Tony Ferreira, and I sat in my kitchen. We boiled a bunch of water because we found that the plastic would melt or soften at 200 degrees. 212 is what water boils at. We take a beer or a bong hit, thrust our hands into the water to grab a baby and stuff it in a test tube. And then I sold them at all the little mini marts around town, and then eventually 1,200 of them to my church. So fun stuff. It was awesome, and that gave me enough money to buy my first official laser. I drove to Spectra Physics in Silicon Valley, California, bought a laser, came back, turned it on a speaker and put a mirror on it, cranked up Rush 2112, invited a bunch of friends over, blew their ears out, and said, "How do you like it?" And and that was enough. That was my beta test for those people. And my brother and I built that company up the next 11 months and sold it. And and then the next year I became an Inc. 500 company.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
fun
Great.
stuff, right?
Yeah. And you've had a few other businesses since then in between?
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was number one. Number two was called Orion Industries. We did pool and spa lighting, low voltage lighting for pools and spas, and inspection lighting, fiber optic, and our laser company, the one that was acquired that I sold them. And then from there, I started another laser company because the Japanese came to me and said, "Your boss doesn't want to build the things that you are capable of building. Would you be willing to leave if we helped match funding and become your first distributor?" So I agreed and started that one. I sold that 11 months later for it was 800,000 total, 400,000 in capitalization and 400,000 in long-term equity. And that was really fun. And then I built an ad agency. That company lasted for 6 years, went bankrupt in the end. Actually, didn't go bankrupt. We folded the company and sold the intellectual property we developed during that period to a handful of investors that wanted our cool stuff. Even toured with Peter Gabriel for one season during that time, which was a blast.
Yeah.
And then,
so
then internet technology took off.
So how big did how many team members did you get to the ad agency out of interest?
Ad agency was 4. So it was small. My expertise, or my domain of expertise, right? Zone of genius, as we call it here at Nootopia, was really good at the ideation, coming up with the original concept for the company, figuring out if it's viable and scalable, building the technologies to make it do so, and evangelizing the technology, hiring the first employees, and then finding somebody that was much more capable of driving the company, maybe credible with investors, had built a company to significant liquidity event, which I considered, something in the $10 to $50 million range was like a real liquidity event. And then I would hand the keys over to them. I would continue to innovate and move from the everything in the company to, E-Myth 101, right?
Yeah.
To really working on what is the market, how does the market define what we're doing, and what is the message that they need to hear that helps them to latch onto us, that we are the brand that represents that technology or that solution. So,
yeah. Right. Great. So after the ad agency, what was next?
So then I got really excited. It was really fun. Okay. So So I did the ad agency. Well, I did the ad agency in the middle of doing the third laser technology company I did.
Mm-hmm.
That was one. We got that one up to almost 50 employees, about 6.5 million in revenue. We built lasers that gave you a laser light show on movie screens. So we worked with movie theaters and the rest. And when that went, when we folded that company, I personally went bankrupt. But was not my first rodeo in terms of startups, and my bank knew that, and I'd always been good with making payments, making sure that I took care of everything. So while the bankruptcy court is dragging my Mercedes, my wife's Jaguar away, but letting us keep our home, my bank calls and says, "Hey, Mark, you got a bunch of equity in your home. Do you need 20 grand to start another company?" And I said, it's a very nice thing to say. And so they lent me some money. I bought a shitty Ford Ranger with centerline wheels, really nice, right? Really nice aluminum racing wheels. So it looked really good, but it was just a piece of crap. It barely idled. It leaked oil. I could never drive it in a client's driveway. And they had just come out with, and I had heard a tape. I had found a tape from an Amway distributor that was they called it a prospecting tape because it didn't mention Amway. And in it, the guy talked about cleaning gutters and windows as a tool to meet wealthy people, because they were the ones that paid for having gutters cleaned and windows cleaned, and as a way to fund his Amway business. He didn't mention Amway, so I didn't know what he was talking about, but it was a very interesting tape, guy named Larry Winters. And so I thought, well, you know what? I could clean gutters and clean roofs and run a pressure washer and do all that stuff. So I took that 20K. I bought a Macintosh. I was a Mac guy, still am.
Yep.
I bought a Mac at the time, a PowerPC Mac. Ooh. I bought a Hewlett Packard inkjet color printer that would do 8.5 by 14 or legal size paper. I think you call it B6 or B8 or whatever in Euro standard. Yep. Then I bought the first revolution of digital cameras from Kodak. And what I did was I built a FileMaker database that would import images from the camera and put them into a page layout that would then print on 8.5 by 14 paper, and it would make 4 postcards that I could just use a paper cutter to slice. So, and I'd put a stamp on and mail them. And what I did is I went into the nicest neighborhoods in the Pacific Northwest where I lived, and I took pictures of the nicest house, 3 shots on this digital camera of the nicest homes, and then I mailed them a full color postcard. And it didn't say, I want to pressure wash your roof or clean your windows or do your deck or your fence or your concrete. It said, I will charge you exactly this much to do your roof, exactly this much to do because I built this database and I had kind of a feel. I was fumbling in the dark to a certain extent, but enough that I got a feel for it. And 18% of the mailing I did bought within 6 weeks. And another 20% bought within 6 months.
Wow.
So as a result of that, I had a very high ROI on my marketing. Plus, I'm walking around these neighborhoods dressed fairly nicely, driving this cool looking shitty truck, and people are coming out going, am I a stalker? Am I with a tax man? Who am I? Which was great conversation. And here's a fun thing. When you are in, this is not dire straits, but I'm not at my peak. My confidence is shit.
Yeah.
I've just lost everything I thought I had. And I didn't want to interface with anybody because I didn't want to have to tell the story of my woes. Right. And which they could give a shit about, but it was one of those things. Right. So the most fascinating thing was one day in one of the nicest neighborhoods around a private lake, I'm doing a $600 window washing job. And the owner, I'm gonna get, this is not me being racist. This is me literally sharing exactly what it sounded like. I bring my best friend who I built multiple businesses with, and my kind of tech geek guy. I brought him from Hawaii to come work with me to come up with a new idea that would leverage this new thing called the internet. And so this is 1986 or 1996, sorry. And so we're doing this window washing job, and it's one of the things on this house, this was the architect for the whole neighborhood. He was a Japanese man who was incredibly talented. And he had these huge windows that were they were structural windows. They weren't just glass, but they actually kind of held the house together. And if you scratched that window, it affected the structural integrity and they would have to be replaced. And that was a $10,000 window. And this was a $600 window washing job.
Oh, geez, that's risky.
Right. So we're doing this job and we're finishing up, and he goes, Mark, can I talk to you? Right. This is my bad Japanese accent, but bear with me. And I said, yeah. And I'm going, holy shit, did we just completely fuck up this deal? Are we screwed? And he goes, I said, are everything okay? He goes, oh yeah. You guys do fine. You do fine work, but you don't love window washing and you don't love power washing. You guys talk about technology the whole time. You got to do what you love, man. He goes, you see, and then he pointed and he goes, you should do, it's like John Wiley. Well, when I went bankrupt, I had a list on my whiteboard. I had a carriage house outside the house that I had put a whiteboard up, and I wrote the names of the investors that I loved working with, the investors I would never work with again, and investors I had heard about but didn't know. And one of them was the inventor of the high-speed modem, a guy named John Wiley.
Wow.
And all I knew about John is that he had gone bankrupt 3 times on his company before he sold it for $68 million. And so to Diamond Multimedia, one of the largest modem companies in the world. So I take these pictures, and I meet him at a venture conference, just like what's going on in Portland, Oregon. And his wife had contacted me and says, we need to have our roof cleaned. They built a $2.5 million home, which was it was a mansion at the time in the Northwest, overlooking the lake, with with the dock and all that. And so he invites me over, and we and the first thing I do is, because I'm in mud, I look like a guy that cleans roofs for a living.
Yep.
And I said, John, how did you decide what VSLI technology to use and what the data path was going to be on these technologies, right? Before they even knew that a 56K modem was going to be the resident. And he goes, 1, what are you doing in Mutters? And 2, you got time to talk? He just pulled in his Mercedes, his S-Class. So he gives me a tour through his mansion, and we sit down in his study. And I said, John, what's your biggest problem right now? He goes, here's the deal, man. He goes, after I sold the company, and because I had been embattled in that process for a long time, for almost 20 years, I promised my wife that she could go out and play and explore, and I would take care of the kids. And so I'm listening to Barney, the purple dinosaur, every day, and my mind is turning to mush.
Yeah.
And I said, so I had found a company that was doing technology. I was always consulting, and I always found companies that needed growth, technology and systems and process and connections and the rest. And so if you've ever seen the movie or the TV show Silicon Valley.
Yep, that's hilarious. Yeah.
Isn't it? Okay, well, that technology, Pied Piper, is the technology we developed. It was called JStream and became a product called Infinite Ink. And it was a compression technology. And our first big customer, and the one that really took us to the liquidity event, was the guys that became the founders of Tesla. They had a thing called Rocket ebook, which became the Kindle. And so they bought our technology from us and did it. But I brought John in. I introduced him to these guys. He loved it. He wrote a check for $400K, wrote another check for $1 million a year later, and took that company to liquidity, $33 million liquidity event.
Wow,
so.
That's fantastic. Yeah, what I love about that is not just your approach to test and research, but also just the wiliness of getting in there and stalking, wealthy, intelligent people and getting yourself around them, so those opportunities, are created. I think that's genius.
It's really accidental. I wish I could say that it was all, really anticipated and I was strategic about it. But I think that curiosity is a really important thing, and that all of when I sold my first company, I was living in the back of a garage in a health club with no windows. And I woke up every morning to Michael Jackson doing Man in the Mirror as girls in tights and thongs and leg warmers were stretching on the yoga room next door. And I built that company. My brother and I built that company and sold it to this company doing the pool and spa lighting. So this was a laser display company. I was building lasers that gave you a laser light show in your living room. And when a year after I had sold that company, I was with the CEO of that, the company acquired mine. And I said, Rick, what if it didn't work? And he said, Mark, he goes, here's the deal, man. He goes, I didn't buy the company for your lasers. I bought the company because I knew you'd make something work.
Mm. Yeah.
And and again, I don't mean that out of arrogance or hubris or anything. It was that I was curious enough and still remain curious enough to want to try stuff, to break shit,
Yep.
to be willing to stretch the edges. To when people say, here's a fun one. When I was building our nootropics company, which is these custom blended formulas that help you think clearer and have better memory and be more creative and focused. For the first 3 years, people sent me flying pigs because
yeah.
those people closest to me, who had been some of them in my beta test, said, "You're never going to make a business out of that."
Mm.
When pigs fly, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it's great. So I've got probably 60 flying pigs that people have sent me through the years.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything else on other businesses before we swing back to focus on Nootopia? You want to share?
Yeah. I think lastly, so I ran an incubator in Southern California. I built an e-commerce software company so I did that pressure washing and cleaning company for a year. I sold it for $113,000 to a pastor who was able to use it for taking guys that were getting out of prison.
Yep.
So they could do this kind of work. And then I used that cash to start an electric car company, which failed immediately. And which is interesting because a year later, after that failed, was the time that I sold, that I met with the founders of Tesla, who was Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpening, who were doing this rocket ebook. So if you look at your life, you can start connecting the threads backwards, and they show, they start to develop patterns, and you can start to use those to divine the tea leaves of your future. But it was great stuff. But I ended up running an incubator. And so I built an e-commerce software company called Quickie Mart. I named it after the Apu's little shop on The Simpsons. Yep. Yeah. It was great. And we ended up selling bits and pieces of technology to other high-tech companies. And then I moved to Southern California, Newport Beach, California. And myself and a handful of other guys, we ran the largest tech incubator in Southern California. So we had 522 business plans on my desk the day I arrived there. And wow. We developed filtering technologies. We called it micro mergers, in order to figure out who was real, who was the best of the best. How do we combine 5 of the same company into one company that would work? Get rid of the stuff that the people that weren't really A players.
Yep. And
give them a place, give the B and C players a place to play. And then this company that I'm in right now started because my wife in 1998, we had our last child. We were always the geeky vitamin conscious folks. And so they were all home births. So my last daughter, Livy, was born on a couch in front of the fireplace. And the midwife gave my wife 4 oxycodone, and she fell in love with those. They became her muse. And a decade later, she committed suicide on those. And so
I'm sorry to hear that.
It was awful. And I just was in, so catharsis for me was, how do I get people off of addictive drugs? Whether they're meds or illegal, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And how do you don't just make them into a vegetable that isn't high anymore? How do you help them become high performance individuals that can realize their potential? And so that was kind of the goal of that is if I could get you something, Troy, that could help you to think clearly so you make better decisions. And then the second complaint I would get was, okay, great. Now I can make great decisions, but I'm a couch potato because my adrenals are burned out. I got no energy. My ATP sucks. My health is in the garbage. So the second part was, how could I give them natural energy that would help them execute on those good decisions? If I could do that, if I could help you there, then you would start forming little bits of success, and you would have an upward spiral instead of the downward spiral into the toilet you've been doing.
Yep. Fantastic. Yeah. So that's so officially Nootopia started, was it 2008, did 3 or 4 years of beta testing?
Yep. Yeah. What I did was I founded a company in 2012, January 15th of 2012, called Web Nutrients. I actually bought a former nutritional company that I had built in the 90s. During one of those periods, I built a human growth hormone precursor product. It wasn't human growth hormone. It was the amino acids you need to create human growth hormone. and an effervescent tablet. And so myself and a partner did that, and I sold out of that. I bought the domain back from him in 2012, lit it back up, and turned it into this custom nootropics company.
Yep.
Great fun on this, by the way. So here's fun. So I've got this little company. I'm on a Match.com date in 2011, and the girl is a realtor. We're at a little tiny bar in Bellingham, Washington, which is a little college town on the coast up in northern Washington near Vancouver, BC, Canada. And while we're there, and literally it probably sat between 20 and 40 people. It was tiny, and just below in the shadow of the college, of the university there. And this guy, the 6'4" guy, is up at the bar, and she goes, "Hey, that's my old boyfriend. You got to meet this guy. You'll love him." So she invites him over, and we have he and I have this animated conversation. And I say, "What do you do?" He goes, "Well, I'm the lead photographer for Sports Illustrated for their Olympics and special issues on running and things." So fantastic. I goes, "What's your biggest problem? What's your biggest?" He goes, I'm ADD, and I hate Adderall and some of the drugs. I would love to not be." I said, "Great." I pull a test tube of, right. And I say, "Dude, try this." And he goes, "Awesome." He goes, "I'm flying out to South Africa tomorrow to go shoot Blade Runner, right? Pistorius. And I could use all the help I can get." He texts me after he finished. He goes, "Mark, dude," he goes, they had 20 handlers on this guy, and I didn't hear one of them. I got the shot, even though they tried to distract me. How do I get more? And then he called me incessantly for 3 or 4 months until finally I met him at a restaurant. He goes, I finally pick up and I go, "Mike, I know what you're asking for." He goes, "Yeah, just make me as much of that stuff as you can. I don't care what it costs." Right. That's a great customer test.
Yep.
And he said, I'm getting in my car as we speak. I'm driving up to you. He goes, "We'll go to this restaurant. We'll do a deal in the restaurant. It'll just be like something out of Scarface." And so we did it. It was awesome. And he's a great friend. But it kind of launched the company. It forced me to go into business. I was reluctant.
Yep.
You know how shipping, you got to ship eventually.
Yeah.
You got to face down the resistance, as Steve Pressfield would say. And that was it. And so he forced me into it. Well, I didn't have a website up. I didn't have anything. And I was moving from there back to Portland, Oregon. And while I'm in transit, a girl emails me and says, "Hey, man, I heard you've got the thing from that movie Limitless."
Yep.
Rumor has it.
Yep.
I'm super ADHD. I want to move back to Pasadena. I'm living in Denmark right now. She goes, "I'm a web developer, and I noticed you got a domain, but it says, GoDaddy parked here," right?
Yep.
And she goes, "I will trade you a website for some product." And I said, "Awesome." So I'm expecting, okay, 3 or 4 months from now, we'll do some kind of deal. And so and I happened to have a Dropbox at the time with a bunch of images of my product and some copy I had written, just, stream of consciousness stuff, nothing serious, and my PayPal address. And so literally the next morning I wake up, I got my kid, I got a moving truck, I've got my BMW, and I've got 3 kids, and I boot up my phone, and it goes ping, 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 with PayPal, $55 PayPal orders of products. She had done the website overnight, had done the website, had listed it on search engines, right? Had set some spiders going, and told a couple of friends on a forum that it was cool shit. And so it took off. That's
amazing. That is a great start story, really, to push you on, to get it going. I love it. So what year would you say officially you started? 2012?
Yeah, 2012, January 15, 2012. So we were at 0. We were officially at 0.
So that is almost 11 years ago to the date of we're recording this now in January. Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
And how old were you back then in 2012 when you started this business?
What was I? Was I 50? Yeah, I'm 61 today.
Yeah, so 50.
So,
oh, great. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've established credibility on how to grow a business. So let's keep moving. We're still at question 3. There's quite a few to go. So do you have any key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of Nootopia?
Yeah. So 2 things. One is the growth of Web Nutrients, which was the first company in 2012. We grew 11,700% from April of 2012 until 5 years later. And then we went through the great shrinkage, like George on Seinfeld.
Yep.
Jumping into cold water. And that was a byproduct of a brilliant marketer, a guy named Dolan Ramsey, who's a close friend. He now works for Jim Quick. Dolan had heard that I had made a form of legal and clean, meaning it doesn't use any drugs, a product that helped you feel like you were kind of on Molly, something that would be very rave friendly.
Yep.
And so he took that product. I couldn't sell it because it was the antithesis of what I was trying to do. I was trying to get people straight and trying to get people really cognitively high performing. I didn't have a problem with it because I knew this was not addictive and it wasn't going to cause any harm. But it was outside of my market and I didn't want to cause confusion. So I said, if you start a company, I'll provide solutions for you. And so he started a company called Limitless Life and built up a big Facebook presence and built a Shopify store. And we made this product for him. And it was an incredible solution, but it also, the problem is he was so good at what he did. We went from 2.1 million in sales to 4.7 million in less than a year.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, which meant, and again, we were making all of these products custom by hand. So I suddenly had to look at, how do I scale that? How do I throw people at that? How do I finance the growth of that? How do, all of these factors that came into play. What about facilities? What about insurance? What about all the things that we minimized in our, in our slow growth or, moderately fast growth, but when you double overnight at a 2 million plus revenue, it gets ugly fast.
Yes. That would be, some pretty fucking big pain points.
Yeah. So it was, there's a guy named Derek Sivers.
CD Baby.
Incredible. CD Baby. Yeah.
Yep.
So, Derek, I had done some press releases for Derek as just a favor because I loved his philosophy in life. And this is right as he was selling CD Baby. And he was coming out with his first book. And so I did it for him and I reached out and said, what would you do? And he said, here's the deal, Mark. He goes, the best employees in the world for me, for CD Baby, were the friends of my employees. And what I said was, you hire whoever you want, but you are 100% responsible for training, motivating, and moving them along. And if they fail, you're responsible for letting them go.
That's good.
And so it was excellent. So
I'm a big fan of Derek. I've read some of his stuff and listened to his book. Yeah, I love his approach to business.
He's a cool guy, and he's really accessible. You can actually reach out to him now. He's living in the Far East, and his wife, and he took his money from CD Baby and he built a fund for musicians.
Yeah,
and it's a trust that funds emerging musicians, which I think is the coolest thing in the world. And then what he did is he moved to a country where the wealth that he had accumulated building CD Baby was enough to set him up for many lifetimes. And so the 25 million or so that he put in a trust didn't, it wasn't damage to him. It wasn't something that was like, damn it, I did that.
Yeah.
It was, let's go light up the industry. Great. Love that. So, yeah. So we did that. So I ended up hiring some family, some distant family members. I invited every one of our employees to bring in their strongest, who they thought would be the strongest employees. And we built up to about 15 at that point. And we were, at one point we were shipping 60 to 75 days from order. I mean, it was that backed up.
Wow.
Got through that. And then we ran into the great collapse or the great shrinkage, which was PayPal doesn't like nutritional supplements. So we lost that. So then we're doing authorized.net and we're finding different companies, and some were charging as much as 12% interest or, their fees for doing merchant fees. Yeah. So that got ugly. And then we had to have multiple merchants and we had to have them in rotation, or because if we hit too many at one time, too many dollars came in a 24-hour period or a 1 week period, they would collapse,
Yep.
And then they were doing stuff like they were doing anywhere from 20% to 80% holdback. So, and again, it locks up your cash. You can't grow with that stuff. So we're playing all kinds of games and we're working with vendors, and this industry, the nutritional supplement industry, is primarily a cash business. It doesn't work on credit. So
Yeah.
the raw products are coming from all over the world. And so you've got to pay for that in advance. And then you've got to make sure that that container makes it to the US, that customs authorizes it, that it gets to you. That can be 60 to 120 days. And it's just an ugly cash flow cycle. So we dealt with that. We shrunk down to 5 employees as we're trying to maintain that and just kept working. So here's well, keep going on your questions, but
we under this one, key numbers on growth, we always like to ask number of full-time equivalents you started with. So I assume just yourself, and where are you at now?
Oh, so we're at 13 full-time employees.
Yep.
But we'll do around 5.5 million this year.
Yep.
So we did 3. I think we did 3.5 last year, I believe.
That's great. That's amazing growth. That team does the manufacturing, or you outsource that?
No, we do it all in-house. Because we customize and personalize, we have to have hands on it. By the way, just so you know, that was from the previous year we did so I merged with a company called Bioptimizers, and we formed a new corporation called Nootopia. So that happened we finished the deal in September of this year or last year.
Yep.
But we spent 2 years dating, building a brand called Nootopia, and getting to know each other and seeing if we liked each other.
Yep.
So that's why. So we started it. I did 580,000, I believe, the prior year, and then we did. We were on a 2 million run rate or so, and then we went from 2 million to 3.5, and we built. We built really cool products, and their expertise, the benefit. I had I had 4 offers, from 4 million to 30 million, to buy the company, and Bioptimizers offered something more meaningful. When the CEO of the company and the COO, we got on a Zoom call in July of I think it was 2020. Yeah, it was in July of 2020. He said, "You want to sell your company?" And I said, "No, it's not for sale." And he said, "Great, we're looking for that." So, because he didn't want somebody who was going to cash out and disappear.
Yeah.
And then he bought tens of thousands of dollars of product and built a massive Google spreadsheet of how each one of them worked, what worked for him, different customization profiles that he took, all of the ones that he gave to friends and company, compatriots and the rest, and compiled that data. And then we launched the brand in November, just before Thanksgiving, in November of 2020. And we did a Facebook Live to launch it. We did a still image of just a profile face that said Mr. Newts. So he built a brand, right? And he said, "Here's the deal." He goes, "Both of us have jumped into bed together, bed with other, deals that we've done, and we've walked away with crabs or some other STD, right? So why don't we take it a little slower? Let's get to know each other, decide if we have the same philosophies on life and business and culture and those things. And if it works out, awesome, we can unmask you," which we did on Dave Asprey's podcast. If it doesn't, you get your company back, and you'll just be that much ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Which is a very unique opportunity to work with people that know their shit, are absolute master marketers, and people that are willing to throw resources into a bet. And if that bet doesn't work, you still win and they win.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business?
Absolutely. So just as an insight, Bioptimizers, which is the parent company of Nootopia, my company, they started in 2004 with 2 guys out of Vancouver, BC. Actually, they grew up in little towns of 350 and 650 respectively, on the eastern seaboard of Canada. And got excited, went to BC. One of them became an incredibly effective trainer and internet marketer. So he was really good at both. And the other was a world-class bodybuilder trainer. So a vegetarian bodybuilder trainer. So in 2004, they grabbed one-way tickets and almost no cash and went down to Panama and decided that they were going to live the life of an expat. So they did that from 2004. And then by 2008, they were pulling their hair out, trying to kill each other, having literally knockdown, drag out, brawls, and they had started this company, which became Bioptimizers, and it would vacillate. It was profitable right away. It did about 1.3 million the first year, got up to about 1.7, and then just cycled there forever. They didn't put any effort into it. And as is typical for serial entrepreneurs, you always think that everything you touch turns to gold.
Yeah, there's
right?
a great saying. There's a great saying I use sometimes, especially if the person I'm mentoring or coaching is their first business, they've knocked it out of the park. That I can't remember who said it, but success is a poor teacher. You just got to be careful that you don't think you got the Midas touch, that everything you touch turns to gold.
Absolutely true. In fact, the lessons are made when you're in the trenches trying to keep the damn thing alive or resuscitate it from a near-death experience. And I've certainly had my share of those. It's not a bad thing. It's inevitable. If you're going to be successful, it's inevitable. There are I've got some friends that have been just business after business after business have been successful, but I've been in the trenches with them, and they were not successful all the way through. They were early growth, early success, dead, resuscitate, find them investors, find a company to acquire them. I've been there a couple of times myself. And so it's really important to understand that and not to let your ego get in the way.
Yep.
In my first company, my ego had gotten to the point where I told my brother, who was my partner, I pushed him against the wall. I was a bodybuilder back then. I pushed him against the wall and I said, because somebody wanted to buy the company, he didn't want to sell it. And I said, look, man, we could, I built this company. I can kill it. Like I was the only thing, and I learned later on, and it hurt our relationship for about 6 months. We're great, been best friends ever since. But it's one of those things where you got to be really careful. The elements that make success, about 80% of them are unpredictable.
Yep.
I mean, you got to do everything right. And even if you do everything right, there's no guarantee. Timing is going to come into the market play in the current company.
Yeah.
If the movie Limitless had not come out, I would not have been nearly the success.
Yeah.
I rode on Bradley Cooper's coattails for 5 years. Every time the movie Limitless opened in another country, I got a whole bunch of new sales, and that kept us going, and it happened over and over and over. And then the TV show came out that he was also the producer of, and it did the same thing, and it just elevated us. And it allowed us, it did a couple things. One is it allowed us to play a bigger game with less of a risk, because basically the advertising and marketing were a huge portion of it. Well, we were getting millions of dollars in advertising every year. Yeah. Because as the movie continued to make trends. So anyhow, back to Bioptimizer. So it kind of vacillated, and Matt built Matt Gallant, the CEO of Bioptimizers, built the #1 guitar teaching website in the world called Guitar Control. He built a number of others. He was running at 1.6 businesses, all $1 million plus, all using internet marketing as his key tool. He's just very good at that. And he's very metrics driven, which is super important. You need to have a closed feedback loop so that you don't end up going off in the weeds thinking that you're getting success. We'll solve it with volume as you're losing money at, $4 a piece or whatever.
Yeah.
So one day it kind of had an awakening where he said, if I took all of the energy that I'm doing, distributed across 6 businesses and put it into one, what would happen? And that was around 2018.
Sorry, what year did Bioptimizers start officially?
They started unofficially in 2004.
Yeah.
And officially in 2015. And then they decided to actually, and again, they're vacillating at a couple $1 million a year. And then 2018, they said, let's turn on the gas on this. I'm gonna get rid of everything else, pay no attention. They actually tried to do a venture funded project, which was basically a click metrics type of platform, because they understood how much click fraud was going on. So they bought a click fraud detection or built a click fraud detection platform, an AI platform. And the greatest thing was they're going, oh man, all of the people, Google's going to love it. Facebook's going to love it. TikTok's going to love it. Everybody's going to love it. They went to those guys and said, hey, you know that almost 90% of your traffic is click fraud? And they said, we don't want to hear about it.
Oh, geez. Wow.
Let our customers keep paying for those fraud clicks. We're fine with that. So anyhow, so he got disappointed with that and doubled down again on the company. By 2018, they had done a little over 5 million. 2019, they were up to 12 million.
Wow.
2020, 24 million. 2021, right? We hit a really nice 32 million, and now we're clocking in. We should do around 46 this year.
Holy shit, that is amazing growth. Yeah, that's great.
Well, as your numbers go up, as you know, when you're doing fast growth, it eats up capital, and we're self-funded. We've done it all through cash flow. We ascribe to an operating system. We'll probably hit that in a later question, but we do a thing called the EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System, which is an incredible platform for us to be able to kind of put a wrapper around systems and process. We've got a couple of platforms for tracking R&D, for tracking progress, for tracking OKRs, which are, like what are you responsible for? How are you doing on those things? And we keep those feedback loops pretty short. We have weekly calls with everyone, Monday and Friday with everyone, and we have monthly calls with all our key managers, and then we have quarterly calls and monthly calls. We call it it's called the same page meeting, where are we still in bed together? Do we still like doing what we're doing? Where do we suck? What can we fix? And it's really one of the great attributes of it is it's always positive.
Yeah.
We try to keep, there's plenty of time to get pissed off and to start pointing fingers. But in reality, if the situation is typically a byproduct of somebody just not paying attention to something, or being overwhelmed, or not understanding what the real focus needs to be, I'm as responsible as anybody for missing some of those key things. I get confused. Once our company gets over 50 employees, that's when I kind of go, shit, I'm in a different league, and I don't know how to manage this.
Yep.
Somebody walks down the hall and I don't recognize them. It's a shock to me. And so that's why I'm really happy to have these guys or I should say this team that is so good. They're scale oriented. One of our guys, Trevor, has worked with Oracle and I think Salesforce and some of these larger corporations, as was with them when they were early, and then grew to be multi-billion-dollar divisions of their companies. And so that kind of familiarity of what that enterprise level success looks like is really valuable when you're trying to audit yourself and say, all right, and a company at 15 million is very different than a company at 30 million or 32 million. It's not even the same ballpark.
No, that's right. And how many full-time equivalent team members did you start with, and where are you at now? I know there was you guys merged, a few years ago.
Yep.
So you started on your own.
Yeah. And when I started my own, and my daughter Livy was my first employee. She was being homeschooled at the time, which was convenient because during homeschool you can get 6 hours of classroom work and all the homework done in about 2 hours.
Yep.
And so she would sit out. I had a Mercedes wagon at the time with one of the higher end stereos. She'd sit out there and listen to Tears for Fears and The Cure and a bunch of other bands, and sing at the top of her lungs. And when she got her voice burned out, she'd come in and start making capsules for me based on intake feedback forms. It was great. And we just had an incredible about a 3-hour talk last night. We got on Zoom and just talked about life and what's going on. So yeah,
that's good.
And then we kept growing. We had a lot of problems, Troy. When you're doing something that isn't recognized in the industry, and in our case, it was nootropics, which are like very edge. It was already nutraceuticals, which are kind of interesting. It was handmade nutraceuticals that were customized. It was handmade nutraceuticals that made you feel like the pill in the movie Limitless. It was handmade nutraceuticals that make you feel like the pill in the Limitless out of my house. And you could just keep going, right? So I would go downtown a couple of times a year and try to lease. I would make phone calls and try to lease space for my company because it was taking over my house. And they would all say, we don't understand your business. We're not really comfortable with that. So I ended up having to have a custom made trailer, a 20 or 24 foot custom trailer, and then outfitted it with workbenches, outfitted it with heating and cooling and systems and refrigeration and everything. And then I would have employees. I hired a bunch of young employees from that I'd known, they're my son's best friend, and and other people that they kind of like word of mouth. I scribe on the hiring front. Derek Sivers, who did CD Baby, he was kind of the one that pushed me through saying, hey, just hire some good people, have them hire their close friends who they trust, and make them responsible for their performance. And it worked for him, and it worked really well for us for the first 5 years or so.
Yeah, great. So before you guys merged, how many team members did you get up to, and then where are you at now?
We got up to 15, and then and that was during the growth phase when we got up to about 4.7 million.
Yep.
And then we crashed the company. We lost merchant accounts and a bunch of other stuff. Again, fast growth puts you on the radar. Putting you on the radar makes your merchant accounts and others, especially if you're in any kind of an edgy industry, they get a little bit wary. They started withholding a bunch of our cash. PayPal held back $24,000, I think it was. And those are small numbers, but they were big numbers for us. They were important numbers that we needed for our growth at that point. And so we ended up shrinking down to 5 employees from 15, and we shrunk down to 330,000 that year. Very scary, because you've got infrastructure, you've got equipment, you've got leases, you've got everything set up for a much bigger company. So that's kind of how that went. And now the combined companies are 120 employees.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
We've got represented 19 countries. We're in 19 countries as far as employees. So a lot of it is distributed, which is actually attractive. It's a good way to, we find that saying, hey, you can work from home, totally cool with that. We've got performance metrics for you to follow. That'll be a good guideline for you. And we have mentors that will guide you through the process of how to grow and what career path you might want to go on within the company. And it's been fantastic. I couldn't ask for better leadership that makes that happen.
Geez, that would be hard, managing the different time zones if you've got 120
Yes.
team members across 19 countries.
Yeah, it's exactly. What the interesting thing is, so Matt Gallant, the CEO, he was a big advocate, as I was, when Tim Ferriss came out with 4-Hour Workweek. But I don't know about you, Troy, but I've had very little success with that kind of like applying what Tim taught in that book. I've seen people that have done very well. On his blog, of course, he's got tons of examples of people that have figured it out, but typically they don't grow a lot of employees. They typically are 2, 3, 4, 5 people, maybe a development team overseas, especially in Asia, where you're running a 24/7 cycle. You got a couple developers in the States, you got 5 developers in maybe Pakistan or India, and then you're able to hand code back and forth over the cloud and build that kind of thing. And especially for SaaS businesses, software as a service businesses, that's super effective and it's a great model. But when you're dealing with retail products and direct to consumer products, it's a different business. So the way we leverage it is we built a 6 Sigma customer support base, and Wade Lightheart, our co-founder, president, he's the one that made that happen. Matt is genius at marketing support, copy, all of those things. Wade is an absolute genius at herding a bunch of really cool people that have high empathy, that want to serve the customer. And as a result, we have a 6 Sigma customer support group. Mm-hmm. We are in the 99.9997%, perfection. And it's fantastic. So that's where the distributed work comes out. The other is my co-development team in R&D are in Bosnia. So I'm able to hand off ideas to them, and the next day they've worked through it already. They've done tests, or they've done, all the kind of laboratory work.
Yep.
And that works well. And then our marketing, we're always doing, we're doing multiple landing pages. We'll do A, B, C, D, E, F, G testing. So we've typically got somewhere around 20 to 100 landing pages at any one time that we're testing and we're perfecting and looking at the stats and, throwing some traffic against it and seeing how it comes out. So
that's great.
And that's really it's nice to do across countries as well.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
Oh man, in this company, Um, when a couple of things, the first customer that called us when we were about to quit, when they said, "Thanks for changing my life." That was 3 months into it. And then there was a time when the revenue was significantly higher than our debt load and our operations overhead. And I was able to give cash bonuses to employees on a weekly basis that were close to, if not equal to, their paychecks.
Wow. Yeah.
And that feels good. And there are times, as you are well aware, when you bootstrap a startup, when you self-fund it, where you're not paying yourself. For me, it was almost 2 years that I didn't pay myself. I just consulted on the side, and I had some other cash that I had accumulated and some investments. But it was, it's those moments you're going, I'm glad that I'm a passionate entrepreneur, because otherwise I would have said, fuck this, I'm out. This is way too unrewarding, way too shitty.
I've been there a couple of
and then
times.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's also, you get a couple shitty customers. You get the customer. I had one customer from the Middle East who was just rabidly, loved it, bought everything, and then called me one day and said, "Look, I've got all the names of all the key people, FDA. If you don't refund all of the money that I paid you for product, in the 2.5 years that I've been with you, I'm going to just basically make your life hell." So I say, okay. Yeah, it's total asshole. Yeah. No purpose. And the funny, sad thing was, immediately after he got the last check, he tried to place a significant order for more product. We shut him down, but it was one of those things where, this guy is a seasoned asshole, no intention of doing good. And you just get those people, as you well are aware, and they make your life hell. That one person they kind of wipe out the 100 great feedback pieces you've received the prior week.
Yeah. What does success look like to you?
I'm an old guy now, right? I'm 61. I'm still deeply entrepreneurial. So I'm not relaxing. I'm not about to retire. My dad told me that's a shitty thing to do. It's stupid, and you will want to put a gun to your head after about 3 weeks. And so my dad has always been good with advice. I'll take him up on that. Mm-hmm. It is having great relationships and being able to, this is going to sound really like overblown or whatever, but it really is being in service to others, finding ways that are significant enough that are an aggregate of all of the knowledge and wisdom and insights that you picked up, and being able to leverage those in younger people or people that are just on the same journey or want to be on that same journey, and they don't understand the pitfalls that they're going to run into. So I think you and I have a huge responsibility to help people avoid the pit, to cross the chasm, to make a significant impact. And also that it's an opportunity for legacy. If you do it right, I hope that, not on the ego side. I'm watching the TV show, the series about Getty right now. Paul Getty. I can't remember the name of it. It's called Trust, I think, or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, it is Trust. Yeah. Which is dual meaning, right? And you look at that kind of like Succession, and you look at that and go, this guy was just a shithead dirtball, right? There was very little good, if any good, in him. And you look at that and you go, fuck, I do not want that to be my legacy. Yeah, he was rich. That's a shitty legacy. There's one of my mentors, a guy named Tom Hulse. He invented the magnetic switches. He was the guy that patented the magnetic switches that you find around doors and windows on alarm systems.
Yep.
So great guy. He died. When he died, I believe his net worth was around 300 million. And great mentor to me. He funded 3 of my companies over time, back in the late 80s and then through the 90s and early 2000s. And when he passed away, he left the whole Pacific Northwest, which is Portland, Oregon area, Seattle, and the rest. All of these areas that he touched came together, and it was like a massive rejoicing, not that he was dead, but that he lives on in all of these startups that have continued to keep him alive through their technology or their opportunities they created. So
yeah.
Anyhow,
number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast growing business?
to marketing.
Yep.
Metrics, measure everything, create a closed loop response system, and do, like, for me, I actually love marketing more than anything, but I'm about a 6.5 to a 7. Matt is like a 12 on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah.
Right. So recognize excellence and don't be afraid to hire excellence, great people, and give yourself an opportunity for great people to show up, and do not let your ego get in the way. I did a series of 4 ads where I hired an actor who looked like Jesus to drink my product like this, right? Drink my product. And he talked about the wine, right? And they were funny as hell. They were awesome. And I forgot that a lot of my market, a lot of the health and wellness market happens to be maybe churched. And as a result of that, I alienated people. They thought it was sacrilegious and that it was crude, and that, right? And they were funny as hell, bro. They were great. They're great. And I'll send you some links. They're great. They're great.
That'd be great.
And the challenge was I fell in love with the ad instead of going, how does this ad work? Am I really addressing that client? And then I found other stuff. What I found was building community on Facebook and on Instagram and on medium.com and on Quora. I could go on to Quora. Here's a clue, by the way. I, out of desperation of just needing to answer questions, because that's a great way to kind of go through your thoughts and catalyze your insights, is I went onto Quora. I found questions about nootropics, about nutrition, about business, and the rest. And I just started expounding on Quora. Within 3 months, just over 3 months of answering questions 3 days a week, I would spend a couple of hours 3 days a week. And I really did elaborate answers. I would embed YouTube videos. I would embed, PDFs, all kinds of stuff. I made it complete. I made it like I would want somebody to teach me some insight. As a result of that, my sales went from 10,000 a month to over 30,000 a month, directly linked to that activity, which was a $0 high time, 6 hours a week commitment, which is actually pretty low in comparison to what you might put out. And it had such a long tail that lasted. I quit playing on Quora as our company grew, and I had less and less time to do those things. And then after the merger with Bioptimizers, I couldn't afford the time yet to do that. But it is probably, for me, that and medium.com, and going onto Facebook and not posting on Facebook, but actually commenting, finding people that are interesting to me, commenting, finding interesting responses on Facebook within that thread, pulling something that was really cool and meaningful out, making people would call it a meme today, making a graphic out of it, posting it, tagging them, and expounding on why it was meaningful, and then also putting it in that thread as a graphic. And I ended up growing a significant amount of Facebook followers. So the minute I did my first post on our product, I had over 1,000 followers, looking at that.
Yeah.
And it was an investment. It took a year to build up that kind of credibility, but I also built up 700 of these graphics that became significant pieces. I'm publishing them as a book. And so not all your effort in marketing has to be wasted. It can become successive tools that you can use. So,
yeah. How did you fund the business? It was all bootstrapped?
Yeah, bootstrap it first. And well, always, it's been bootstrap all the way through. Bootstrap. And then I've always felt fortunate that, like I'm a domainer, so I collect domains. At one point I had over 750.
750 domains.
What's that?
Sorry, you had 750 domains?
Yeah, .com domains.
Yeah. Well, I had John Jonas from onlinejobs.ph on the other day. He's going to blow you out of the water. He had 300,000 domains.
Oh, geez. Can you imagine the renewals on that?
Yeah, I know. I don't know if he's still got many of them, but yeah, he back in the early 2000s, he was right into, squatting and affiliate marketing, etc., before he got on to what has been his great success with onlinejobs.ph. But I nearly fell off I'll use a standing desk. I nearly fell over when he said 300,000 domains.
No, dude, it's crazy. Here's the deal though. So I bought either keyword centric or market centric, right? Domains, always.com. If I found a good .com, I would also probably buy the .net and .org. And about every quarter, I would sell one or two or three for $2,000 to $10,000, and that kept things rolling. And that kind of little extra push I needed to buy into something, to do a marketing event, to do a product rollout, any of those things. So, and I know that doesn't sound like a lot of money. It wasn't, but it was enough to keep the lights on. It was enough to have an innovation. My stuff isn't normal. I don't do normal stuff. So as a result, everything it requires a bit of innovation, creatively finding resources that can help, fulfill that. And yeah, so it's that kind of stuff.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Absolutely. My industry there, it's plotted. Basically, I just got I think it was a Wall Street Journal and Harvard Business Review did a recent integrated study on nootropics and nutraceuticals, right? Nootropic brain-related nutraceuticals projected to be 89 billion by 2030. So again, I did not intentionally pick this; it picked me, and then I just happened to be a unique fit for the industry, and I also love it. There's, as you know, as an entrepreneur, especially somebody that guides entrepreneurs, there is significant value in being able to upgrade your cognitive performance and your overall health, because you're pushing to the edge all the time. And the top CEOs, I've interviewed thousands of CEOs, and in that, I found that the people that are at the 0.1% performance level, they're what I consider superhuman. They have very unique neurology and physiology. They have hyper endurance. They've got a big belief in what they're doing, and they're able to do stuff. They're able to perform at levels that most people, that would just fatigue most people even thinking about it.
Yeah.
And for them, it's just another day in the life.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Yeah, two of them, or two or three. So first was when PayPal lent me money, and then the next day told me that they no longer wanted to be part of our family, and we had already started investing it. So that was one. That gave me an indication that what the thing I was doing was very, very close to the edge. It was certainly not mainstream. It wasn't a dry cleaner. It wasn't, a retail store. The second was when the merchant accounts successively failed, when we were at 4.7 million, and suddenly we were just crashing. And I was having to fire family and friends and, these people that I'd grown to know and love. And weeks earlier or months earlier, I had been able to bonus them out big chunks of cash.
Yeah.
I bought one guy a car. I did, these are the kind of things that we're getting into. And I'd also, and I felt like you're going through this thing. And because this wasn't my first rodeo when it comes to startups, I knew that I could make it through. But that's just the kind of glimmering on, there's entrepreneur and there's opportunist. Opportunist at that point goes, fuck this, I'm out, I'm gonna go do something else. The entrepreneur in me said, I've been through this before. I'm probably not going to die. I've got some bandwidth on credit cards because I didn't have any debt there. And so it was kind of one of those, how much can I squeeze this? At the same time, is your great employees are looking at you going, you asshole. I thought I was going to be here forever. I thought, we were looking at liquidity events. We were doing all kinds of things, and that happened. And then this will be interesting. And I know I can say this with Matt and Wade on my side, is when we did this merger with Bioptimizers, we had 4 offers on the table. One from the former CEO of Princess Cruise Lines, who was doing Kratom in the United States and I built a Kratom stack that was really novel in its approach. Kratom is a painkiller it's an herbal painkiller product. So, and so we had offers from as high as 30,000 down to about 4.5 million. And then, one from a friend, a guy that I had been in business with 25 years prior, who we're still working together today in some form. And then you make this decision. You go, I'm going to step off this cliff, and rather than take a massive liquidity event and do that, because I had been part of many liquidity events. I'd been part of a $45 million liquidity event, a $28 million liquidity event, a $33 million liquidity event. So I had those experiences as either consultant or one of the management team or one of the co-founder management team. But this would have been an individual. I owned 100% of the stock. This would have been a big hit. And the decision was, do I want to cash out and go do something else? Obviously, there'd be significant non-competes. And also, did I trust the nature of the individuals that were going to be cutting that check or those checks? And what it came down to was that I'm not done yet. I really believe that the technology we're creating is going to change the world. And I believe that working with the right people, the technology that we're going to be doing in 5 years will be so advanced. Like I've got, a roboticist working here in my lab here who's just building robots to automate what I'm thinking of. And when you start seeing that, you go, holy shit, man. You look at the company iRobot and the guys that are doing the Spot and all the other big robot technologies here in the States. I think they got $1 billion infusion of cash from what's his name? SoftBank. And you look at those and you go, God dang, that's scale. Well, Matt and team, they want to build $1 billion corporation. We have our eyes on that. We're not, and I think that's a really neat adventure. What if, Troy, we become $1 billion revenue company with our technology? How much of an impact can we make at that size? So,
yep,
there we are.
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value? Focus on the shit that matters. Quit focusing on minutia. This is not the first time I've had to go through that. Back when I was young, I was Mr. Super Organized, and so I always had my desk clean, which my business partner at the time, Wyatt Starnes, felt was a downside. I sent you a Quora response on him on a connection. So yeah,
but Wyatt said, "Here, let's do this, Mark." He came into my office one day. We had just leased out a building by this Tom Hulse guy, and it was a former Hewlett Packard facility. So all of the walls in the facility were enameled steel, white enameled steel, so they were whiteboards. And he said, "Let's do this, man." And he was just a genius whiteboarder. He would sit us all down and he would whiteboard for 5 or 6 hours, and then he would slice the whiteboard vertically, and he would say, "This is for marketing. This is for product development. This is for sales. This is for technology." And it was just brilliant. And you didn't see it when it was going together, more like a mind map. But then when he vertically sliced it, you go, "Aha, you clever devil, you." Then he would fly off to Japan or to Mexico to chill for a weekend or a week, and then come back and be refreshed. And we're all burned out trying to make this happen. But it was great. But he said, "Let's do this, man." He goes, "Let's make a mess. And if we're successful, we'll clean it up later. If we're not successful, it won't fucking matter. Somebody else will clean it up for us."
Yeah.
So it was great. It was a great insight that Wyatt left me with, and something I hold today. But at the same time, when you're working in a distributed organization like we are, where we got people all over the all over the world, it's super important that you're focused on the things that matter, that move the needle, that you defocus on anything else, that you spend time on the stuff that is really going to move the needle, and that you're accountable to yourself and everybody else around you, and you work diligently to get ahead of that performance curve. Otherwise, you're going to constantly feel like the tail is wagging the dog, like you're just you're almost a victim of this fast, high-speed environment that you're building, and you're suddenly going, help, I can't keep up. So really, really, really important to focus. And that means this.
No, yeah, saying no. Right. Saying no more times than you say yes.
Big time.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
The people stuff, meaning not that I love working with employees and people. I love nurturing and growing them, but Let's take one example where we had this. We hired 2 employees, close friends. They had all of the credentials that meant that they should have been rock stars. And within a month or 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, it clearly appeared that they were just, smoke and mirrors. And when they let them go, they sicked OSHA, the, safety folks on us for the United States. They sicked OSHA on us and cost us $16,000 because we didn't have certain things set up. We had we didn't have a clear exit path, all that kind of stuff. And people that just don't get that you're working your ass off to keep the thing alive. And what a lot of employees don't understand, because maybe you drive, maybe the car you drive is maybe newer or nicer than the one they're driving, or whatever happens to be what they think your undeserving trinkets are. And maybe you worked 20 years to be able to afford that thing, or you saved up, or you invested, or you had a liquidity event or whatever. They don't understand, or they don't understand it's a 10-year-old car with 200,000 miles on it that you've driven the wheels off of. It just looks nice because it's a BMW, or it's got it's a German mark, right? And that kind of lack of understanding of employees. And I think it's really important to recognize that that's going to happen, and to build systematic risk mitigation into your hiring and growth process, and also make the elegant exit for employees so that they don't feel like they've been belittled, they put down, they're stupid, they're incapable, and to make that exit an elegant growth opportunity for them, not a fuck you, you're out of here, that doesn't work. So that's been the biggest pain in the ass, but also the greatest growth opportunity, because when you find a rock star, it'll change your life.
Totally. Yeah, totally agree. It's one of my sayings. I think people are the hardest thing in growing a small business, and it's where the value's at. So, and also part of that is that recruitment is the most important job that a manager does. Because if you fuck that up, if you don't get the A players on the bus, as we've been talking about, then, the chasm between an A and a B player is just miles.
Oh, and their B's hire C's,
Yep.
and the C's hire just shit.
Yeah.
And they excuse themselves out of their,
Yep.
So yeah.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
There is there's daily rewards, seeing progress, and the other is like when I see, and it's not just sales numbers, those are great, and those are a good marker. I mean, I think you need to keep that in mind. But the other is seeing these aha, or experiencing these aha moments where an employee realizes their potential. They do something that surprises you. We've got a girl downstairs named Kelly. We hired her out of, I think, Bear Corporation. And so she's working in our lab down there, putting prototypes together for us. She came originally from the pet industry, running a series of pet stores or clinics. And, you never know where the brilliance is going to show up. And I can give her something to do, turn around, get back to my desk, and she's coming upstairs going, I'm done. What's next? And, or even better, she doesn't say what's next. She goes and makes what's next, because she has an idea of what needs to happen for us to continue to move. I've got our roboticist I've mentioned, who is so far and about, I mean, he was asked to leave his last company because he found he found defects in the company that he wanted to fix because it would make it better for the employees. And they rejected him, and they rejected him, and they rejected him, and they wanted to put him in a hole. And but the same guy that left that company on negative terms, the former co-founder, head of sales of that company, took him to lunch the other day. He's now retired because they're such great friends, because he recognized the potential. And I get to see this guy thrive. I get to see him do miracles, and he makes me look good.
Mm-hmm.
So not a bad deal, right?
Yeah. What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
That I don't have to be the guy that comes up with all the great ideas. And I'm not, I don't have a big ego. I absolutely, I'll give people credit all the time. That's one of the things you elevate the people right around you, and they will pull you along in the wave of success you create. But it's really important to understand that you don't have to be always be the core of innovation or the core of great ideas. I think Steve Jobs at one point felt he needed to be that, and then he met Johnny Ive and, was forever changed in that, and Phil Schiller and the rest of those guys. So I think it's really important to recognize, as fast as possible, find people that are fucking awesome, give them the tools and the freedom to go make mistakes and do cool shit, and praise the hell out of them for what they do, and find ways to, whether it's monetarily or just benefit wise, make sure that they get the credit. Put them up on a pedestal. If there's an interesting thing in MLMs that you see, multi-level marketing companies, that a lot of traditional businesses don't do. IBM does it. IBM's always done it. And a number of other companies, Apple does it now and others, is celebrate your people's successes and put them on fucking pedestal and let them know that they are rock stars. Do it with wisdom and constraint. You don't want to get people, a lot of people don't, the first time they get exposure to their own ego, they fall in love with it, and that can be dangerous. But at the same time, I think it's really important to elevate your people and give them an opportunity to thrive. And also don't be hypercritical and call them losers for their failures. Co-work with them to say, where did this not work? How do we, take that, what we just learned from that, and take it. You're going to make a ton of mistakes as a founder. You're going to get close to death. You're going to have many near-death experiences, and your employees are going to be in that with you, whether they know it or not. A lot of them didn't sign up for that. They don't own the stock that you do. They don't have the upside opportunity necessarily. So you got to give them a hell of a lot of credit anytime to make a success, and you got to be gentle on them when they fail, unless it's intentional and they're trying to fuck you.
Yeah.
In which case they're out.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Probably systems and process. Is develop systems. Systems will take care of a lot of the other stuff. And if you don't develop systems early, and this of course comes with the, when we talk about the entrepreneurial OS, the EOS, is integrating, developing and integrating systems that fit for your business, and then applying them to your life as well. Like when you wake up, how you operate your day. I have a wake up routine. I have a meditation routine. And I don't mean, this is not some lengthy, I do a 20-minute meditation. I do it with, Paziz, this tool, binaural audio tool I use. And I eat very specific foods at very specific times of the day. And I take my nootropics. I eat my own dog food.
Yep.
As both a testament to what we do, but also because I better be close to that fucking product, or I'm not going to be able to answer the question that customer needs, or that distributor or that channel partner or my partner needs to know. And so build those systems and make them, test them. Like it really push against those systems and see where they break, and then figure out if it's you, the system, the support infrastructure, what's making that go, break, or at what level does it break so that you can reinforce it. You can put a scaffolding underneath it to make sure, and go back and readdress those systems with your employees and your partners regularly to see if it's still serving you. Don't serve a fucking broken system, because that's just it's going to put you in hell.
Be the change you want to see in your business. Become more productive and less stressed with our free Transform Your Performance online course. Once you see the benefits, put your entire team through the course at no cost. We start out by telling you the secret to guaranteed success, then over 100 lessons help you be more focused, present, productive, and feel more in control about work. growasmallbusiness.com.
Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
Yeah. Don't fall in love with somebody that is charismatic. Like, be very careful. And I don't mean to stay away from charismatic people. They can be incredible salespeople. They can be incredible, floor cleaners. But but remember that you have this underlying thing you're trying to accomplish. Make sure that you're bringing the people in. The other is, and by the way, I'm not paranoid. So this is not coming from a place of paranoia. It's coming from a place of experience. Is whether it's employees or investors, whether you're recruiting investors or employees or partners, a business partner, make sure that if it's a business partner, they have complementary skills.
Yep.
If it's an employee, make sure that they really have proven themselves to be in that space, dedicated space, committed to that space. They're doing their own self-learning. They can answer questions as good as Google on certain subjects. They're, that kind of thing. They're domain experts in the thing that you need the most. And when it comes to investors, go talk to other companies that they've invested in, talk to their leadership, the people that actually receive the check, CFO, the CEO, the president, whoever, and make sure that is a good guy. I had an investor that started investing in my company, and he wrote the investment documents. Very sharp guy. And what I didn't see, neither did my attorney see, is that he had 10-to-1 voting rights. And as soon as he had done enough, he owned enough stock through his investment that even though I owned significantly more of the company, his 10-to-1 voting rights gave him the ability to vote me off the board and eventually vote me out of the company. And he even tried to do stuff with my wife. I mean, it was that bad. So, check these people, make sure that you are not getting into the world of snakes. And by the way, I've also had incredible investors who have changed my life, who have supported me, who have taken the 2 a.m. phone calls when I'm just fretting, and also be that person for other people. Be the person they can call at 2 a.m., whether you've invested in the company or you just got an interest in seeing that person succeed. So.
Yeah, I've had 30 business partners now in 15 businesses across the last 24 years, and a handful of investors as well. They didn't work in the business, they weren't my business partners. Plus, I sit on 5 boards and chair most of those. So I've seen a lot on that level, the investor or shareholder level. And when I'm talking with people, mentoring them, particularly those that are either starting up or going for the next growth stage and I want to bring new investors in, I really do caution them to make sure exactly what you said, do your research, make sure they're not an arsehole, because at least one of those 5 companies that I sit on the board of at the moment has 1 or 2 arseholes on the cap table. They're very disruptive, create a lot of distractions, destroy value for management, for the board and other shareholders. And it's just not pleasant. I step into those shareholder meetings and I'm going, fucking hell, there's so many more things I'd rather be doing than having to mediate this shit fight because of this dickhead, or 1 or 2 of them, It's interesting. I enjoy it because it's fucking hard. But at the same time, I'd rather be having those conversations with great people. So it comes back to the number 1 job a manager does. And on that level, recruitment, you got to recruit the best people for your cap table.
Absolutely. And also look at what's your big goal? I own exitpath.com because I was lucky and was able to sell my first company after 11 months. And then the next one, I was in for almost 3 years, and the next one I sold after 11 months. And so I thought that was the formula. You build, scale, and sell. And sometimes often far before it ever reached any kind of real trajectory. I mean, it was hockey stick, but it was early part of the hockey stick. And you decide whether you want a company that's going to have liquidity. And remember that a company is a third thing. Don't fall so in love unless you're into lifestyle business, which I totally honor. I think that's great. But if you want to create a business that is going to make an impact and is going to grow and is going to create, eventually you're going to want to be helmed often by somebody that is not you.
Yep.
And whether you move into a board position or you get a liquidity event or you sell it to somebody that is the next CEO, which has been great. I've had a couple of those that have been great because the people taking them over were so much more capable, and they'd had big liquidity events, or at least reasonable liquidity events. And I think that's a real key. One time when raising money, I went to the one of the big, investment club things we had in Portland, Oregon. And I walk in and I had made a list of the investors I wanted to work with again, the investors I never wanted to see again, and then investors I didn't know who I would like to at least poll and see if they're cool, but I'd heard they're great to work with. And one of the things that you'll find when you're in that, this is a little bit of a deviance, but it's close, is they will always ask you, good investors will say, you got any skin in the game? And I had a liquidity event and had bought a pretty nice Mercedes S-Class. And I had it parked on the Park District in Portland, Oregon, right outside the window of where we were, about 3 months prior. And I'm coming into this investment meeting with these guys. Nobody had put any money in yet. This was my first role. And I literally had met one of the investors in a elevator, and I did an elevator pitch. He just finished swimming at a swim club. We're going up to my attorney's office. He was going to see somebody else. And he goes, you're dressed a little bit nice for Portland. What's going on? I said, I got this cool e-commerce technology. And he literally said, cool, I'm in. We'll set up the meeting. They said, Mark, and they did many of these investors, they all knew me because I'd been a serial entrepreneur. But they said, hey, you got any skin in the game? And I said, gentlemen, I'd like you to come over to the window here, look out. And I had sold my Mercedes for enough money to make payroll the next 3 weeks or 3 months. And I had bought a 1982 Mercedes 300 CD, which is a little two-door Mercedes with 0 horsepower and a diesel engine. It barely made it up the hill to get to the meeting. And they laughed and they said, all right, we're in. And so I raised 300 million or 300,000 on that round. So right then, but yeah, really important to surround yourself with great people and have a fucking critical editing piece.
Yep.
Push these people to the test, because they will under pressure when you're not, and don't be afraid to work through the dating phase. Push off the investment, do it in an elegant way. Let them know you're interested. You're not playing games with them. You're just getting down to the nitty gritty and finding out how they operate under pressure. So,
what are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
I think it's real. I think things like Strength Finder, Covey, 7 Habits.
Yep.
I think it's building culture tools like that are really key. Again, the entrepreneurial EOS, the EOS that we use, having those tools. One of my mentor in culture was the founder of Covey, or the co-founder, Will Murray, and I got to spend a lot of time with him, and he would tell you that that if you're not building a cultural stool, a leg of the stool of your organization, you're in for serious trouble. And make sure it resonates. We built in my businesses, this started in 1986. I built a thing called Fun, Fame, and Fortune. So that's our cultural edict. For our current company, we have 8 very specific things that we address, and we have somebody in the team. When we get on it, we have a Monday call with all 120 people on it, and we have them read and kind of decipher those 7 or 8 now components that make up our company belief system. And as a result of that, they're sharing in their own voice and their own interpretation of what those mean, what it is to be in that company. And it's been absolutely critical, because one, you don't know if you're going to be called on. It's not mean. We don't give you shit if you don't know what's going on. But it's very important. And that's been really helpful. In the one that we did prior to this, Fun, Fame, and Fortune, fun was making sure our employees were doing the thing that they were great at, because you'll enjoy it. You'll have fun doing that, right?
Yep.
Fame was recognizing them for their contribution to the company and recognizing the customer for their contribution to our existence. And Fortune was making sure that we were being a profitable company so that we could elevate our employees economically, we could have resources to do R&D and innovation, and we could actually grow the resource, that we're building. So it's a mission, and you have to have a combination. You've got to have, in hiring employees, you've got to be part missionary and part mercenary. That blend is critical for growth. They want to be oriented towards success, their own personal success, as well as the company success, but they also be passionate about what they're doing, to the point where they'll forego a raise this week in order to make sure the company gets to the next level, knowing that down the line it'll pay dividends.
Pay is often a fifth on the reasons why people work somewhere. Ahead of that is alignment with the mission and the values of the organization, that they've got challenging work, they're trusted and developed by their line manager. So pay is what they say is a hygiene factor when it comes to this stuff.
Oh, that's a great hygiene factor. I love that term. Yeah.
Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
I don't. I think that here's the illusion of the entrepreneurial lifestyle is you're going to get balance. I had a great mentor on this who said that, he goes, you're going to get balance. You're going to swing the pendulum really hard one direction. And when it comes down, I want you to pick up your wife and kids or your sweetheart or your significant other, and remind them that you love them, that you care about them, spend a couple of days with them, and then it's going to swing the other way really hard. So you're yeah, you have to understand, they have to sign up for it. When I was starting my first company and living in the back of the health club in that windowless garage, my this girl that I really, really liked, and she really liked me, the guy that owned the club said, you need to tell her what this life is going to be like, that this is not just 15 minutes in the garage and suddenly you're going to be in a mansion and everything's going to be, hunky-dory. You're not built like that.
Yeah.
You can't be an aggressive athlete and an entrepreneur and have balance. And so I sat her down at the bar. We closed the club up for that day. We sat down at the bar, ate a cookie together. And I said, here's the deal. I have absolutely no time for you. I love you. I think you're incredible. I want you in my life. I have no time for you. I'm going to build this thing. I have a mission to put a laser light show on every stereo in the world. And she just looked at me and said, I'm in. And I said, all right, what, and that's when you got somebody. My sweetheart, who her office is right across here, is the same thing. She said, I am not going to watch you fail in this merger, not because of the economic benefit of you making it, but because I believe that there's so much more that we can do with this company that you're not able to do alone. Do you mind if I step in and help? And she just, all the plates that I was crashing, she's picking up and spinning for me. And it's those kinds of people. You're not going to have balance, but the payoff is fucking incredible. One is you're going to change the world in some fashion, or at least your world. The other is you're going to have these little bits and pieces of relationships that you never would have had if you were balanced, because balance is also stasis, which is also mediocrity.
Yep.
And there's a great book. It's actually for more of a Christian set, but it's called Addicted to Mediocrity by a guy named Frankie Schaeffer. Francis Schaeffer was a theologian. Frankie Schaeffer was son or daughter, I can't remember. But regardless, and it talked about what it's like to, and this was, in that time, it was a church environment. It was, they're putting a fucking fish on a coffee cup and calling that an extension of like Christianity. And she's going, that's bullshit. That's lame as hell, right? And so in the same way, your business is an extension of your art, of who you are, of what you're doing. It is going to find itself in every dinner conversation. It's going to permeate what you read, who you talk to, the conversations you have, your Facebook posts, your Instagram. And so it's super important to understand that though you're going to be out of balance, you're also going to have an opportunity to have far greater enjoyment in that out of balance lifestyle than most people have.
Yep.
And every once in a while, you'll get to do what you're doing right now. You're going to go take a week off plus and hang out with the kids and with cool people. I will guess, correct me if I'm wrong, Troy, but I'll guess that the people you're going to be hanging with, some of them or one of them is another entrepreneur, or
all of them are.
See.
I caught myself out the other week thinking, I went out for beers with mates. I'm going, and even we've got an annual bushwalk. We go deep into the bush here in Tasmania. There's 8 of us in the group, sometimes 9. And a couple of years ago, I've looked around going, fuck, we're all parents and we're all business owners. So you kind of gravitate to, those people. Yeah.
Well, it's a different, I think the language is different. The curiosity level is much higher about how are you doing it? What are you doing? That kind of that little glow that comes when you go, holy shit, what if I applied that to my business?
Yep.
Or what if I applied that to my relationship with my significant other? Or what, you know what I mean? You find those things that you'd never find in medium culture.
Yeah.
Plus, you don't talk about shit. You don't talk about, I mean, it's not about the fucking scores, the scores on the local sports team. You might do a little bit of that, but it's about the score that you're keeping, about your business, about that employee, about that thing that's going on, about the innovation you're creating, about the technology, that opportunity. Those are the things that fuel you, and they become almost spiritual discussions in the fact that it's a very grounded and yet very elevated discussion. If it was Maslow's hierarchy, it is way at the top of that pyramid.
Yeah. How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
Oh, I think it's constant. I mean, it is constant. So my first exposure was like, Think and Grow Rich. And then I read Master Key to Riches and I taught it. The only way for me to learn it was to teach the 70 keys. So I taught Master Key, and that became really, really valuable. And then a bunch of books aligned with that. So from the early 90s, 1991, a business partner handed me a book. It sounds, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Shit, what a great book it was. But it sounded like it was about his ego, and it was really about getting out of his ego. It was really great. And then Dan Millman's book, a classic as well. And my brother handed me Think and Grow Rich. My big brother, Doug, incredible guy, missionary in Nicaragua. And then it got into, I did my first Tony Robbins seminar. There's a guy doing the success seminars. Can't remember his name. Great seminars. I had an office next to the co-writer of Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Wow.
What happens, and then I dated Tony Robbins' assistant. And and that went deep, right? She was not lightweight when it came to personal growth.
No,
you did not. You did, right. You couldn't let loose. And some of them are unrelenting. Some people go into personal growth and professional growth. They do it as a hobby. It's like that's their thing. They never really apply it necessarily. You have to be careful of that. What I found is that some mentorship groups and organizations like this have been incredibly valuable for me. And there's a ton of them. Some are better than others, but one of the great opportunities I have with this business is not just in the podcasting realm, but I get to deal with guys that run these organizations. Matt just got back from MMT, which is a big organization as well. Joe, you may know this guy, right? Joe Polish.
Yep.
So Joe just sent me signed copies of all of his books because he started on our Nootropics program. And so he said, all right, dude, you did me a solid. Let's do this. And so now he's on my prototype list. I think that the moment you quit developing, it kind of becomes an indicator for your life and your business and your relationships. Because what people they make this mistake. They think, oh, can I share an example?
Yeah. It just reminds me of one of my favorite Henry Ford quotes, which is, if you stop learning, you're old.
No shit, right?
Yeah.
And us gray hairs, we're dealing with that constantly. Matt Gallant and I, we are into biofeedback and some of these other technologies. So we spent some time together doing some biofeedback training and those things. And a thing called 40 Years of Zen with Dave Asprey is one of them, and Biocybernaut is another. And we're in it, and in the middle of it, he goes, "Hey, there's an EFT. There's a woman I want you to meet who is about basically it's called emotional freedom technique, and it's basically getting rid of shit that you've got underlying garbage you've been carrying with you, luggage." And I'm thinking, that sounds weird. What does that have to do with brain? And what does that have to do with cognitive performance enhancement? What does that have to do with being a super athlete? And he goes, just bear with me. He goes, listen, I've already paid for you to have an hour with her. It's going to be over Zoom. You can quit early. It doesn't matter. I just think that maybe you might get something out of it. And she said, what's the first trauma you'd ever remember in your life? And I was 3.5 years old, and I remember it distinctly. And we go through it, and she goes, here, I want you to make friends with your, Mark back then versus Mark now. And I want you to go make friends with that little guy and then go through that event over and over and over. And eventually maybe that event won't be so significant. And holy shit, I thought I was going to go do a brain upgrade, and I ended up getting a brain, body, mind, spirit upgrade. And the thing that you don't realize when you're doing personal training, personal growth, is that and business training growth is the depth of, I know it sounds spiritual, but it's the depth of spiritual growth you end up going through that you don't anticipate. You think it's about numbers, you think it's about spreadsheets, you think it's about finding the new marketing twist, you think it's about this. Those things you get, those are great, but those are frosting. The core of this is building you as a person that becomes, I call it indomitable. When you become an indomitable human being, when the shit can hit the fan and you do not freak out, you don't cower in a corner, you don't beat up your spouse, you don't beat up your employees, you don't fucking become an asshole when you go, or if you do become an asshole for a moment, you look at it, smile, apologize from the depth of your heart, and you can see yourself through an accurate lens. If you don't keep developing, there is a slippery slope, and you will inevitably slide down that slope, or you'll freeze in time and just not get better. Sorry, off the soapbox. Sorry,
You're right. Yeah. Now, you've mentioned mentors before. Anything else on mentors or coaches?
Just that they're waiting for you. They're around every corner, and if you are open and explore, they will show up. The guy in this town, I'm in a town of 25,000. The guy that owns the commercial, that at one point owned a ton of commercial real estate here, owned a ton of residential real estate and commercial in Dallas, Texas. He happens to be a neighbor. His cousin walks her dog by my house. We became friends. She'd bring her dog in, my dog, we'd hang out together. And she says, "Hey, I need to introduce you to my cousin. He's pretty cool. I think you guys both talk business. It'd be fun. He's now my mentor when it comes to commercial real estate and those things, which are becoming more significant as we become a bigger company."
Yeah.
Like, how do we do that? Do we just lease? Do we buy? Do we, take appreciation, depreciation on the asset? Do we, what are the things there? They show up over and over. When you give a shit, you make it an intention. That sounds weird again, but it's not. You make it intention. You write it down, make it something that you focus on, make it something that you really want to accomplish. You would be surprised at what happens. You just become more aware of the opportunity for those people. And I fucking had conversations with people a table over in a restaurant, and suddenly they become like this guide for me. And I think it's really important to be open and don't cower. And I'm an inherent introvert, so this is not like me, but I also am interested. I'm deeply interested in people. So my introversion is hidden underneath a deep curiosity to know who you are, what you do, and how you work. Mentors will show up when you do that.
Yeah. Do you have a board of directors or advisors at the moment?
Advisors, yes, absolutely. Directors, our board of directors right now are comprised. We're just building it and for the company, but they're comprised of the top management, basically.
Yeah.
So
now, you're one of the few we've had on that's exited a business, let alone several businesses. Any advice for the audience thinking about exiting down the track?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is the depending on the value of the company and the exit you're going for, the profitability you have, some of the other, there's a ton of factors around the exit. It's not always the biggest dollars that is the win for you. Sometimes it's the best dollars. There's a thing that happens in exits, especially if you've been funded by either big angels or venture capitalists, is there's a thing called entrepreneur in residence. If you've built a company, taken it to speed, and had a liquidity event, whether that's an acquisition or an IPO or similar, you're going to have many there. When you get to the size in the industry that's making noise, you're going to get people knocking down your door saying, "I want to buy you." That's what happened to me this last time. Took 10 years, 14 years total for that to happen. But then, when they started coming in droves, and that's what happens. It just comes in flood. And then of course it dries up, and then it comes in a flood again, and it dries up. So it's very unpredictable, but your industry will kind of have an indicator, and how good you're at what you're doing will show up because people know people that know you. When you're in that crucible of the liquidity event, make a list of what's really important to you. Are you would $10 million or $20 million, is that everything that you ever wanted and more? What's going to happen to your employees? What's your grace to your employees? Quick story. When we sold PR Web, we sold it for $25 million. We made a kill list. David McGinnis, the founder of that, and I was on his board. And then I was also chief evangelist for the company as an advisor. And so he called me at 2 a.m. multiple times over the the 6 months or so it took from the time we met with the acquirers to the time we liquidated. And we had many offers in the meantime, some of them much higher. And David didn't like these guys. I convinced him that these were a good fit. And they were. It turned out great. But we had a kill list. So we had, you can't move our employees out of our city. If you fire them, they've got a year's worth of severance. They're fully vested in whatever your benefits program is immediately upon the time, the moment that they become brand new employees with you. All of these kind of factors, because we wanted to maintain the culture that we developed, and we wanted to make it so that the employees didn't feel like this was not an elegant handing of a baton, but a complete binary cut of the old world and the new world. And then what we did is we, on the kill list, so we would do the kill list and we would send it. They were on the East Coast, we were on the West Coast. And so it's 3 hours difference. We would send it to them at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. And 15 minutes later, we'd get it signed off from their attorney and their CEO. So this last kill list we put together had that whole list of things. And then, oh, by the way, we need $3 million more because we want to bonus the employees. We don't want it to come out of this initial principle. So we sold a $25 million company for $28 million.
Genius.
And then we gave we gave one employee that only been with us a little over a year. We gave him $450,000.
Wow.
We gave a bunch of really nice. And he was a $60,000 a year employee.
Yeah.
So it changed his life. And it's easy to call him up and say, hey, you want to come back to work for us?
Yeah.
It's not hard to do. The other is making sure and when you do it, make sure that you are grounded. Like, I don't care if that's a mentor that's been through liquidity events before, and investors that knows what it's like to go from being from living, payroll to payroll and suddenly having a shitload of money. And the fact that your identity is probably tied into the company pretty deeply, and you're going to lose some of that identity. You're going to be known as the guy. There's a great video out right now. You're going to be known as the guy that used to do that thing or had that company or was in that industry. Noah Kagan right now has an interview with a former founder of Kinko's. It's on YouTube. Well worth it. He was one of my idols, but Noah's a great guy anyhow.
Yeah.
But the founder of Kinko's was one of my idols when I was young, and I actually did a deal with them years later in the e-commerce software. It was great. But you could see at this point, he's become jaded, and he's just fucking hates the way that things kind of turned out in many ways, because there hasn't been a big move on from that point. I mean, he left with a lot of money. Don't become that guy.
Yeah.
And I don't mean he's bad. I'm just, again, this is surface. This is just how he appears in this one interview. So this is not me being critical of him, but it is me taking a look and going, I'll bet, because he was so much nicer when he was younger and when he had done the deal and those things. Don't become an asshole because you become rich. Be the guy that people look at and go, wow, that's the coolest guy. I would never know that he's a billionaire or a multimillionaire, or a decimillion or whatever. Don't become that guy. It's very seductive. By the way, don't fucking buy a jet. We bought a jet. We bought a Pilatus, which is a jet prop plane, really cool, 10-seater, and then a Cessna 182, put a glass cockpit in it, and they're just sinkholes of money. Like, and find a financial planner. If it is a good liquidity event, find a financial planner that you fully trust. There's a lot of con people out there.
Yep.
You fully trust, that is vetted, that works with high net individuals. Get a reference from somebody you trust that's been working with them for years, not for minutes, and do that, because it'll make a huge difference. And don't touch that last 5 or 10 million if you have a big liquidity event.
Yeah.
Thank you for it later.
All very good exit advice. Thanks, Mark. All right, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Outside of employees, it's just keeping your eye on the ball and understanding where to navigate next. The whole Wayne Gretzky, don't go where the puck is, go where the puck's going.
Yep. Love that.
Yep. Super important. And don't miss that. It's really, it's so easy to get distracted by one little win and thinking that that's the business. Make sure you really zoom back and go, okay, 30,000 feet, ground zero, 30,000 feet, ground zero. Do that regularly. Otherwise you'll lose perspective one way or the other.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
The Entrepreneur's Manual, 1978 to 1982. It's an old book. And then by 17 consultants in Silicon Valley. Fantastic book, great read, easy read. It's not as relevant today, and yet it's more relevant today because, of course, there's no internet or those things. The other is Tom Peters' The Pursuit of Wow. Strength Finder, I think, is incredibly valuable. Take the Strength Finder test. It's a $15 or $20 book. Buy it, take the test. It's in the back. You just rip it out. Don't even read the book. Just read the intro and how they get the data, and then learn your strengths, because knowing your strengths is a power move. It gets you out of the shit of doing stuff that you suck at, and it helps you to find people that are great at that. Those are 3 critical books. There's a bunch more, but I mean, it's constant, right? It's the next book I'm going to read.
Yeah, I can't believe I hadn't heard of that first book. I'm going to add that to my list for right now.
Yeah, it's out of print. But well worth it.
Yeah. Okay. Any great podcasts, online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
Oh, hell yeah. One is I'm kind of addicted to great comedians like Louis C.K. He went through a lot of shit, right? He, masturbated in front of women, and suddenly, the Me Too movement was peaking at the same time. He got delisted. He got pushed out. And the only people that hung with him were people like Joe Rogan and other people that, they were careful, but they were also, look, man, you're going to come back. And obviously he's done that. I think that looking through the lens of your business through the eyes of people that are not in your industry is really valuable. I think that you can clone a lot of these approaches, technologies, insights from those. So Theo Vaughn's podcast, I think, is incredible. We just talked about the founder of AppSumo. His stuff is great. Tim Ferriss's stuff is good. Oh yeah. Noah Kagan is just fantastic. And there's 1,000 of the guys that I listen to who are in the health and wellness space who are as business as they are health and wellness. I think it's really important. Andrew, this Huberman.
Hang on, man. Couldn't hear you there. Go again.
So yeah, Andrew Huberman. So he's in the health and wellness space, but you will get more insight on how to deliver a complex message in a simple way, how to improve your humanity, how to be an outlier and operate on, in the normal industry, normal world. He's a freak ex-skateboarder who's tatted from here down and on his arms, always wears a black long sleeve shirt because he does not want to offend anybody. Brilliant, fucking brilliant. Should be roadkill. Became a professor at Stanford instead.
Wow.
Skateboard culture. So great guy. And you learn a lot of things from these people on the edge. But the comedians, Theo Vaughn, again, and I think that there's a lot to be learned by the truth telling that happens in great comedy. Is these people are exposed, they expose themselves in the raw sores that they're surrounded, that are part of them. And then they help you to see, because we all have those same fucking weaknesses, the same fears, the same, characteristics, those traits, and they find a unique way to reposition it and to make it, to shine a light on it and make it so it's not so painful. And that allows us to know that it's okay to kind of expose your weaknesses, because that becomes a superpower after a while. When you can be the one that illuminates your weakness and makes fun of it, then people can't fight. You become unfuckwithable.
Yeah. Quick fun fact.
Mark Maron's another one. Mark Maron, I think, is a great one.
Quick fun fact. The court jester in a lot of kingdoms and domains, their job was to hand the truth obviously in a comical way to the king or queen. So they could, because their people weren't obviously confident to raise the heavy shit that may see them losing their head. One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
A tour?
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business.
Well, the EOS, when we hit 15 million, we were all doing scaling up already. And
doing harness scaling up.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Really, really important to do that. The other is plug into, find a core group of entrepreneurs and leaders that have been through the shit. It's nice to have it local if you can, but definitely, Zoomable makes a big difference when you're face to face, I think, who are through it. So, and manicure that tool, contribute something significant to that resource, and with no expectation of any return. And your ROI on that will be absolutely through the roof. Also find, if you mentioned that you've had 30 something business partners.
Yep. 30. Yep.
Yeah. There is strength in numbers, and there is strength in finding people that are like you in beliefs and way different in expertise and execution, with some overlap, so that they keep you accountable and you keep them accountable. They become really, really powerful tools for you. I think that your acceleration and velocity in your business can be a byproduct of the quality of the partners that you have, and the ability to risk your personal return 100% of it's. I guarantee you that it's fucking worthless having 100% of your company if in fact you're limiting your growth potential and your opportunity for growth and exit. So,
well, that Chinese proverb, it's better to have the tail of an elephant than the body of an ant.
I love that one, man.
Yeah, it's great.
You're definitely a Tanzanian. You're a Tanzanian right there.
Yeah. Finally, my favorite question: what would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
Shit. What would I tell myself?
Years ago, you were 14, weren't you? With the paper round, 47 years ago.
Yeah. So is that right? Is that right? 1986. Yeah, whatever that is. So what would I tell myself?
Yeah.
That, oh God, if I had the wisdom I have now, it's going to take a lot longer and be a lot harder than you ever think. Don't try to make this. This is not a marathon. This is a series of sprints. Take a breath between, and also recognize every fucking accomplishment you make. I don't care how little it is. I did not give myself credit for the little things. I waited for the big thing. And when the big thing happens, if you haven't appreciated the little things that got you there, you're just going to be looking for the next big thing, and you're never going to be satisfied. It's an unquenchable thirst. Entrepreneurship can go on forever. It's really unlimited. I mean, what does Tim think as he looks at Apple and goes, okay, what do we do? Another trillion? Like, what is the, what at that level, what do you do? It's really important. I was down to my last $300 on a credit card when my company was acquired. And I had $120,000 in merchant account receipts that I could not deposit because I lived in the back of a health club and I was selling lasers, and the bank said, no fucking way. And so you've got to have an appreciation, a sense of humor, but you have to have an appreciation for all those little things. The circuit board that you did right, the technology you made well, the people that you recruited, the person that showed up, the guy that showed up out of the blue and said, could I rent that, or could I buy that? Or, oh, you're making that? Can you make it in blue? And have an appreciation for that, because those are precious moments that you'll later, if you haven't reflected on them, they go away. They become, right?
Yeah, I'm super shit at that, celebrating successes. It's just I'm not wired that way. I really have to work on it, not just for myself, but especially when I'm working with teams or, other managers, etc. It's really important. And going back to, have you heard of the rule of 4x2?
No.
Something you said at the start there. I heard this from a VC in London when I was living over there. He obviously gets hit up for a lot of money. So what he says to the entrepreneurs, it's either going to take 4 times as long and cost twice as much, or take twice as long and cost 4 times as much. The only difference is you get to choose which path.
It is so fucking true.
Yeah.
It's so fucking true. And you always, when you're raising money, you're on that, gosh, I raised a couple $1 million for a company in Southern California at one time, and I'm with Guy Kawasaki at Garage Ventures. That was a big capital raising thing. Guy was the first evangelist for Apple Computer, and has been quite an entrepreneur since then. And so I raised the money. I call my boss on my BlackBerry, and I say, Bob, I got the money, and I say, all they need to know is the valuation, and it went from a $6 million valuation to a $160 million valuation, because I had the check. And of course, guy said, no. This is not how we operate. We need to have 18 to 20% of your company. We can go as low as 15%, but that's it. So it's $2 million. You run the numbers, but we can't run at a silly valuation. And I had to do that 3 times before he finally said, okay. And it's that kind of shit. You cannot be insane. You're already insane to be an entrepreneur, but you can't be insane when it comes to valuation and the rest of it. Be generous, be equitable. It'll be amazing to see what happens when you get to that, inevitable, whether it's liquidity event or just fucking running, SaaS level cash flow, and you're able to ferret some away.
Thanks very much for your time today, Mark. Really appreciate it. I'm sure we could speak for another, I reckon this one's going to come out to about an hour and a half. It'll be our longest yet, but really interesting. You've had a great career since you started. I think you said 14 was your first real business. So 47 years, in the industry and doing some interesting different things, and congratulations on your success over those decades.
Thank you so much, Troy. It's been an absolute delight. By the way, really, really good questions. It's the first time I've been drilled like this from somebody that actually gets it. And I love that. So thank you so much.
That's it. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. It means more small business owners will find our cast and help people with their business growth journey.